Welcome, everyone. This is Glenda Dawson and L.D., and you are watching Glenda's Dragon's Den. We have a phenomenal guest with us tonight. She is so experienced, so knowledgeable. She's beyond words. I'm going to let her just basically talk about herself.
Well, if she's beyond words, how's she even talk about herself?
I know. I gotta rephrase that every once in a while.
You have any soundtracks?
No.
Needle drops, anything?
No,
Okay,
no,
well,
okay.
we'll just wing it. See what
All right.
happens.
I'll just do telepathy.
There you go. Hi, Barbara Lim. How are you today?
Oh, fine. Thank you, Glenda. Yes, happy to
Thank
be.
you for being here with us.
Before you get too far into this, did you mention why we're here, who we're here with?
Oh, we are here. You can watch us on the Conscious Awakening Network on Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, and many other streaming platforms like YouTube, etc., etc. And guys, if you don't catch us live, you could catch us in those other formats anytime. We even go on Spotify, so you don't have any excuses now. So welcome again, Barbara.
Thank you.
Tell us about yourself.
Well, okay. I think there's quite a bit to tell. First of all, I'm a psychotherapist for many, many years, since 1976. And I've been doing regular therapy practice. And then the things that are more interesting to actually talk about are that I got a lot of training in the 1980s, mid-1980s, for about 5 years, had training in past life regression therapy. And that opened up a tremendous world to me. And I got into that kind of work because I had been traveling to Peru and to Egypt. And at those two countries, suddenly, without any warning, I had these flashes of what certainly seemed to be memory rather than just imagination. And I concluded after a few of these that, I think that these are memories coming from past lives. And at that point, when they began to happen, I didn't really believe in past lives, like many people here in the Western part of the world don't. I thought it was, a very interesting idea, but rather quaint, that people in another part of the world had. And but I didn't pay any attention to it until 1981, when I was in Peru, and then about 3 months later in Egypt. And in both places, I just had these overwhelmingly powerful memories. That's what I still think of them as, of having been a different person, sometimes female, sometimes male, and different skin color, different hair color, different nationality. And that I was remembering having been in the place where I was actually in this life, and but it was as if I had been there in a previous life, and in these little memories that came up, I remembered what I was doing and what my life work was, or what was going on at a very important moment. And so with, I'd say, about 9 or 10 of these things happening. And by that time, I began to call them spontaneous past life recalls. And I was wondering if something like this could be used therapeutically, remembering something that would be important enough for the soul to bring it over and present it in moments like that in this lifetime. I thought, there must be some significance to this. And since I was already a therapist, I thought maybe somehow remembering past lives, especially traumatic ones that might be affecting this life,
Mhm.
which one of those spontaneous recalls involved a great tragedy that I had experienced, oh, probably 3 or 4 thousand years ago.
Mm.
But it was very vivid in my emotions now once it came up. And so I thought, maybe this could be helpful to other people too, if they had had any real difficulty or trauma that is carrying over and influencing them in some way in this life, that maybe there's a way to clear that up. So it took a year after that trip to Egypt to discover on television that I was definitely guided to turn on in the middle of one afternoon when I had never turned on television in the afternoon before. But one day I just did. I didn't plan to. I was just doing it. I look at that now as guidance
Mm.
from an unseen source, probably my spirit guide that said, you need to know about this. So, what was on the television when I turned it on was a woman leading a workshop in past life regressions.
Mm.
That she had a group of people there who were all lying on mats on the floor, and she was regressing them from one lifetime to another, about 6 lifetimes during the course of that workshop weekend. And anyway, I was absolutely thrilled because here was a woman using this idea of past lives and helping people to get in touch with them,
Mm.
ones that they had individually had. And so I watched the whole program and thought, I could do that. I'm already a therapist, I'm legitimate
Right.
with work. And also, I have been taking people into what I call deeper states. And that means deeper states of relaxation for various purposes. And that would be just easy. I would be a natural
Mhm.
in doing this work. So that was good. And then it was actually a whole year from that time when I met the woman who had founded the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies,
Mm.
a woman named Hazel Denning, wonderful, wonderful woman. And she had been doing a lot of past life regressions for therapeutic purposes.
Mhm.
And she had gathered together a whole group of excellent therapists from all around the country who were doing past life regressions as part of their therapeutic practice.
Mm.
So anyway, she told me about this and she said, "Oh, Barbara, you would be a natural at doing this. And so come to our conference, which is starting tomorrow night." She said this was back in 1984, by the way. And it was only an hour away, the conference only an hour away from where I lived in Southern California. So I was very excited and I went to that conference and was so impressed with the professional people and the excellent work that they were doing and the helpfulness that that was to the people they were doing past life regressions with. I mean, this wasn't for fun and games, to see if you were
Right.
Cleopatra or anything like that.
Right.
It was really as a serious therapy that could really help people. So I stayed the whole weekend for the conference, even though I hadn't planned to. And then they were talking about their therapy training,
Mm.
past life training that was coming up. And I took that training for a week. And I was absolutely convinced that this is a wonderful, wonderful modality because you can have a person get nice and relaxed and then take them to whatever their particular concern or interest is
Mhm.
And all these memories will come up in the person in that relaxed state, and that I could really work with that. I could be kind of a guide and keep asking questions to bring out more details. And it would always amount to they're getting a very good picture of a particular past life and what the main issue was there, and how that's affecting them in this life, particularly if it was anything traumatic, or a sudden death that had not been expected, or it could even be good things that happened in that previous life that
Mhm.
get carried over. For instance, I love this example. I regress one woman who is currently an opera singer and a
Mhm.
teacher of other people to be opera singers, and she's living in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I did a regression with her, and she went back to a fairly recent lifetime, probably her most recent one, when she was a woman opera singer.
Mhm.
And in the regression, she got the details of the home that she lived in that other life,
Mhm.
the home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And and she gave a real good description of the rooms and the furniture, the accoutrements, the figurines she had around, and so forth. And she used to not only perform opera singing in public, in auditoriums, but she also would have guest evenings. She had 30 or 40 people in the living room of her home, which was a large room and had
Mhm.
grand piano. And she would do her opera singing right there sometimes. And she
Mhm.
loved doing that. Well, I got to know this woman because she came on one of my crop circle tours, which I'll speak about in a little while.
Yeah.
Um, and then actually, on the way back from England, we stopped in Massachusetts and I got to see that home.
Mhm.
She is living in that home in this lifetime,
Wow.
too, the very same home that she had lived in as an opera singer in that past life. So
Amazing.
that was really, really fun. And sometimes people do find the home that they had been in a lifetime that they have found out about, and they find that home, whether it's in this country or even in other countries in some cases. So anyway, that was fun. So I took all that training and was doing past life regressions here and there in my therapy practice when it seemed like it might be particularly helpful. I
Mhm.
did that. I didn't do that with everyone who came to me. But then in the last module of training, the trainer, who was a therapist I respected a lot, she just warned us, people who were being trained. She said, those of you who are doing regression therapy need to know that it's possible that sometimes somebody would come and have the complaint of having been visited by very unusual beings who are not really human,
Mhm.
but they're real. And they come, they just appear in the person's home, usually, or maybe anywhere, and take the person away for a while. And she did not use the words alien or extraterrestrial. She just said the sort of very, very unusual beings who are not people. They're not human. And
Okay.
she didn't say UFO or abduction, but just enough to make me think, wow, that is really interesting. Up to that point, I had not thought that anything like that was real.
Right.
I had heard about UFOs and seen a couple of the leading movies, but I thought it was just very, very interesting science fiction. but here was this woman saying, this is true.
Mm.
You know, and you might have somebody coming to you for that reason to find out the details of what happened to them. Well, that was like having cognitive dissonance, you know, a whole new idea that just went against everything I had understood up to that point about reality. And not only that, but right after she said that, immediately there was a big, loud, insistent voice in my head. Nobody else heard it, but I certainly did. And it said, pay attention to this, Barbara. You will be doing this. Whoa. So I just didn't know what to do with that. I was just amazed. I was so shocked
Mhm.
and sort of dazzled by this whole idea that here I had a whole week of training from that moment on with that particular woman who said that. And I never even mentioned it. I didn't bring it up again. It was only after the training was over that I had a lot of questions come up in my mind. And how can I find out more about this? So, without any guidance on that, I just found myself, when out doing errands, that I would drive my car to a magazine shop or a bookshop and try to find information about these UFOs and these other beings.
Mhm.
And did find a little bit, and I heard a couple of lectures um, about the abductions um, at the Whole Life Expo, which has
Mhm.
many, many different kinds of lectures going on. And I just found myself very, very interested in that, especially since I'd been told I would be doing this. And I had to check it.
Barbara,
See
I
how
need to
far it was
ask you, have
true.
you ever been able to identify that voice? Do you know who
No,
that
but
was?
no, uh, I think it must be my higher self or my spirit guide.
Okay,
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's come a few times since then, when something really important is either brought to my attention or if I'm directed, it feels like, to do a certain thing. It
now,
has been very
you got
rare.
your certification back in 76,
Yes.
correct? Which means you were obviously studying this in the earlier 70s. What led you to this? Because this is the foundation upon which this regression therapy is based. In other words, you already were a psychotherapist. So what led you to psychotherapy in the first place?
Oh, nobody has ever asked me that.
You see, that's why they keep the 600-pound gorilla in bananas. But
Well, it's a great question.
thank you.
Um, Basically, I have to go back to early childhood to answer that. I always had a sense that I wanted to help people.
Mhm.
But as I grew up, you know, through school, um, I thought, well, what are the helping professions? You know, nursing or being a doctor, uh, being a teacher, if you were a really good teacher, I consider that a helping profession. Um, anyway, a social worker. I thought of the different professions that were possible, and none of them appealed to me. I just couldn't quite see myself doing any of those, even though they're perfectly valid, wonderful professions. Um, so anyway, I got married right after college and had 3 children. And then a few years later, they were still pretty young, but I was invited to be part of some support groups. We called them sensitivity groups. And so this is back in the late 1960s and early 70s. And other people called them encounter groups. In other words, they really were therapy groups, but with those sort of lighter names, shall we say. So I had some training for a couple of weekends by my church, a Protestant church, and they wanted to train some of us members to be good counselors, not licensed, but just have counseling skills, because the ministers of that church were just besieged with people who wanted help with whatever their problems were. And the ministers were not trained in it and didn't have time for it and were not interested in doing that. That was not their idea of ministry. So they developed this task force, and very luckily, I was invited to be one of the people in that task force to learn counseling skills. So we went away to a retreat center for 2 weekends that summer of 1968. And we had two excellent trainers, two men from the School of Theology. This was in Claremont, California, which has colleges and a university and graduate schools and a school of theology. So there were two professors from there who were licensed therapists, and they trained us in this task force. And that's what got me extremely interested in doing counseling work.
Was
In
this a Rogerian-based type of counseling?
Yeah, but pretty much more than anything else, yes. It certainly
Yeah.
wasn't Freudian or anything of that, or even Jungian. Yeah, that was a great question.
Thank
Um,
you.
and it was the caring, the listening, the really hearing somebody, letting somebody know that you really hear them, you really understand what they're feeling, and that you really care. Anyway, I was so impressed with that training, the first weekend even, that I went into the ladies' room and into one of the stalls, and I sobbed for a whole hour. And the sobbing was in gratitude, amazement, gratitude. It wasn't sadness. It was being so thankful. And I kept saying to myself, the thought kept going through my head, thank God for significant contact. Thank God for significant contact. And I realized that I had never related to anybody, no matter how close, to my best friends, to my parents, uh, even to my husband. I had never related with that kind of depth to anybody, where you really could tune into the feelings of that person. So I was doing those groups, having had that training, and finding it more and more important and fascinating to do. And then when people started coming to me for individual sessions, I had to say no, because I'm not licensed. I can't legitimately do that. So that got me thinking of, well, maybe I should get a license in this, because I'm in. I mean, I want to keep doing this kind of work. It's very enriching, very deep, very satisfying for me. And so I was also running another track in those years, the late 1960s and early 70s, and that was movement therapy. I was doing movement classes and had a lot of them in movement workshops, and I actually became an official dance therapist. And so at one point, it was 1973, I was at the point where I thought, I really need to become professional in one or other of those disciplines, dance therapy or psychotherapy. And I decided on psychotherapy. And the morning I decided that, I received a phone call from a friend who said, "Oh, I just wanted to tell you that I'm signing up for a master's degree program in marriage and family therapy. so I can be a licensed therapist. And that's happening at the university that's about 15 minutes away from us. And I said, oh, talk about synchronicities.
Yes.
That's a whole subject in itself, which I've given a lecture on. And I thought, well, that is just what I need to hear. Because even though we had this whole series of colleges in our town and the School of Theology, there was no master's program that would be, appropriate, that would be preparatory for becoming licensed as a therapist. But 15 minutes away was another university, and they offered that program. So I immediately called them and they said, well, we're just about to close our registration for the coming year. And I said, oh, please, I'll get you my transcript. I'll do whatever. I had gone to college back east in New England. And anyway, I was able to manage all that. They held a place for me and everything worked out. And I went there and got the master's and then went on to study for the license exam and did that.
So I want to see if I understand correctly. Growing up, you were called, would it be fair to say called to be a healing facilitator?
Yes.
You knew that some way you had to find a way to facilitate healing. And you matriculated, I'm sorry?
Emotional healing.
Right.
Yeah,
and you matriculated in college. What was your first degree?
Philosophy.
Philosophy. Okay, well.
Okay, so I'd like to back up a little bit.
Please.
At age 4, I can remember standing by the window in our dining room and tapping the windowsill and asking my mother, what else is there? We were both looking out the window. And she said, well, the house across the street and the trees and the sky. And I said, no, I mean, what else is there beyond this, what we can see? And I don't remember how she answered that. But in other words, I just always in this life had a sense that there's something so much more going on in reality. And nobody, including my mother, who was very well educated, nobody knew what I was talking about.
Well, doesn't one expect a child of that age to be very self-focused? And to have a child without being trained or empowered to go beyond the self, to, have that big picture conceptualization, seems to denote again that, your calling and your history are all coming to fruition in this lifetime. Was that to say?
Yeah, that's a very nice way to say it. So in other words, I've always been inquiring. And when I was in college and discovered philosophy, and particularly good old Plato, who talked about how it's as if we are living in the shadows of the cave in this physical world.
Right.
But in the cave, there's a little hole of light way back up there somewhere. And that's what is really real. That's what is metaphysically real. Well, again, I actually cried. I don't cry very much, but when I'm really deeply, deeply moved, that's when the tears come with me. And I sat there in class, oh, thank goodness somebody knows what I'm talking about. And anyway, that was my decision right then and there. Okay, I'm going to be a philosophy major. I had planned to be a psychology major, but this really was so much more appealing to my soul.
Well, you needed the broadening, didn't you?
Right.
Pardon me?
Excuse me, you needed the broadening. In other words,
Yes.
psychology teaches you to judge people on a certain spectrum of sanity.
Mhm.
And I think inertly, didn't you recognize that there was much more to the individual than that singular
Oh,
focus?
yes. I was very dissatisfied with the psychology classes that
Mhm.
I had taken, and very satisfied with the philosophy. So that was the natural for me.
So I
So,
got you out of the box,
mm,
and now you're in a master's program.
yeah,
And are they teaching a specific school of psychology as a foundation as well?
many, many different schools
Oh,
of
good.
psychology. Yes,
Good.
a very broad range. So that was wonderful. So we could all sort of take our choice of how we would do our own therapy.
And
And
offer the clients choices of
yes,
what they would gravitate to and heal from better.
that too.
Wonderful.
You're right.
Mhm.
So anyway, another thing that really opened me up was in the late 1970s, I read the book by Dr. Raymond Moody, the book called Life After Life, about the near-death experiences. And I was just thrilled with that material and thinking, learning so much more about the spirit realm that we come from and go back to after physically dying. I mean, that really caught my attention, and I felt myself expanding. I was already a licensed therapist, but I just really loved that expansion. And then around the late 1970s and early 80s, I was having quite a few out of body experiences, which I had never heard of before I started having one. And they were really wonderful experiences. Always, they happened when I was in a very relaxed state, might be meditating, might be lying on the floor, might be listening to certain music.
Mhm.
One time I was in an isolation tank in the early 1980s and was so relaxed. And the next thing I knew, I was out of there. I was flying through space,
Mhm.
having a wonderful time past all these planets and stars. And at one moment I thought, oh, I should be freezing cold. And then the thought came, oh, no, I can't be cold because I don't have my body with me. It was my consciousness, but not my body. And then I thought I was going to collide with a big planet at huge speed that I was traveling in. And then so I thought, oh, I'm going to collide. And then I thought, oh no, don't worry. I don't have my body with me. There's nothing to collide with. So I went right through that planet and out the other side. So that was a really wonderful trip. And so were the others
Mhm.
that I had. And in many different circumstances, always when I was very relaxed. And in some instances, I was chanting with a group of people, the good old Om chant.
Yes.
Uh, and it went on and on and on and on. And then I would find that I was out of my body and just out there somewhere.
Mhm.
Had some really nice experiences of doing that. I've never had a near-death experience, but I've had plenty of the astral travel, out of body experiences. So you see, oh, another thing is that I continued the movement
Mhm.
classes all through the 1970s and into the early 80s. And then it sort of morphed into my uh, being a Tai Chi teacher because I'd been
Oh,
practicing
nice.
Tai Chi for a few years. And and that really was a marvelous opener because in the Tai Chi, you're bringing up the energy from the earth and opening to the universe and bringing in all the energy of the universe and moving it through the body
Right.
and down into the earth. So it was this wonderful experience in movement again and again and again. The longer I practiced that and the longer I taught it, of really bringing together the heavens and the earth, the universe and the earth. So that was very, very expanding.
Yes.
And, of course, thinking of the great expanses of the universe, the cosmos, space. At this point, doing all of that, I didn't know that there was any other life in space
Mhm.
or any travel in space. Um, but I was just open to the whole existence,
Mhm.
whatever it might contain.
And the
And
harmonics therein.
Right.
yeah, so it was just so, um, I think I was just growing more and more and more open. And so that when new things came in,
Mhm.
like the thought about extraterrestrial beings existing in the first place, that was a startling but gratifying idea. Also, in the 1970s, toward the end of the 70s, I had an experience that was profoundly moving. And that was that somebody had given me a copy of the children's book called The Little Prince, which I had never read when I was a child,
Mhm.
but I read it as an adult. I know I had my children, and I was sitting on a dock over the river at a weekend place that we had in the Baja Peninsula,
Mhm.
and just sitting there in a chair, a lounge chair on the dock, just a foot above the river, looking out at a mountain and blue sky overhead, just incredible, wonderful, peaceful experience, and reading The Little Prince. And when I got to the end of The Little Prince, I was so moved by this little guy from another planet
Mhm.
who came to Earth and made a friendship with a man, the French pilot who had crashed his plane in the desert. And they became wonderful friends. And then when he left, he left by sitting on a stone wall where there was a snake, and he knew the snake would bite him, and that would be his way to leave
Mhm.
and leave Earth and go back to his own planet. So he sat on the wall, and this, sure enough, the snake bit him. But he said to the man before he actually left, before he died, in other words,
Right.
um, he said, whenever you look up at the night sky and see one little star just especially twinkling, that's me thinking of you. And with that, I was so deeply moved that I started to sob, and I cried for several hours every time I thought of it. And my children, who were about, oh gosh, about age 7, 9, and 12, I think, at that time, they kept checking on me. Mom, what's the matter? Can we do anything for you? You know, and I keep saying, no, no, I'm not sad. Don't worry about me. I'm just so deeply moved.
So would
And
it be fair to say he tamed you?
yeah, yeah, yes. Right.
Quite a job, indeed.
So anyway, all of these things sort of added into
Right.
what eventually I began to do. So it wasn't until 1991 that somebody came to me who had been very, very traumatized by these unusual beings
Mhm.
coming into her room at night. She was a young woman, and she was just scared to be in a room by herself, and it was really serious. She dropped out of college and dropped out of her part-time job, and her mother was very concerned about her, that's for sure. And anyway, I worked with her for 6 sessions, 6 regressions, and she found out that after a while that she wasn't scared anymore, that she welcomed the beings. We found out once in the regression and once in her waking life, she realized that she had been healed, physically healed. In one case by a very bad ear infection, and in another case, healed of chronic lower back pain,
Mhm.
which she had been suffering with for quite a while. So anyway, that was wonderful to know that that work during regression for that purpose could be very, very helpful. So
Isn't
then,
it interesting how when people are parented in a fear-based modality, that kind of becomes their relation to things? And then when they realize that maybe they don't need to be fearful and they release that dogma, that's when they can actually let go of that trauma.
well, that certainly can be the case.
Mhm.
I think in her case, I don't think she was raised with fear, particularly, but her fear seemed to be very specifically about these very unusual, disturbing looking to her beings that would just suddenly be in her room.
I just see a lot of children, don't do that, you'll get hurt. I don't mean that she was traumatized per se directly, but just the concept of trying to protect a child and framing everything as a danger.
Well, that's a very good point, and probably all of us have had quite a bit of that put on us, and with good intent, I'm sure,
Right.
from the parents. So that might have been part of her fear, but I think it really was quite specific.
Right.
Right.
It manifested in that way. But if you're predisposed to that, it can, you can lock into something that's totally difficult to relate to if non-relatable,
Yeah,
and
right.
just put it into that model that you've learned as a child. And that's been my experience with children. I was just curious what you thought of it.
Well, I think you're making an excellent point. And so that may have been it, but certainly um, she was, no matter what else was going on in her
Right.
life, she was very traumatized by these visits, by these beings, and particularly about that sense that she had that she was taken away for,
Right.
she was always returned, of course, but each time she was taken away, she didn't have any reassurance that she would be brought back. And
Right.
that certainly adds to the trauma too,
Mhm.
until she found out in the regression work that no matter how peculiar they looked and how scary it was, that um, sometimes they were really helping her. And there was never an experience in one of these abductions, never an experience that was really harmful to her. She had a hybrid baby, apparently, because one night when she came back and was sitting on the floor of her parents' bedroom
Mhm.
in the middle of the night, she came back and realized that she had a baby on her lap. And the baby didn't look very human.
Mhm.
She had a hybrid baby.
Right.
So apparently she had had, in some of her visits, she had had eggs taken from her ovaries, in order to make the hybrid baby, and which she had not been aware of, as so many women have that happen and they're not consciously aware of it. Yeah. But even that she was able to integrate in our work. So that was good. So then I thought, well, if anybody else ever comes for that reason,
Right.
having these visitors come and take them away, then now I know I could work with that and that it can be really helpful. So, but I didn't necessarily think there would be anybody else. And in 1991, I don't think that there was so much material about this. I don't think there were television programs or,
No, you're definitely a pioneer in that.
Right.
yeah. So I just, had, most people just didn't know about this. Most people had never heard of it. That was my impression. And I barely had. But even that same year, another person came a few months later, then another and another and another. I think in that 1 year, I was working with 5 different people. Now, I think it's kind of miraculous that they even found me because I was doing no advertising. But I did mention it to a friend, excuse me. I mentioned it to a friend here and there, and they were the ones who knew somebody who was troubled by this sort of thing and referred them. So then,
Well, there aren't too many post-traumatic abduction disorder specialists, particularly at that time.
right,
We got about 15 minutes left,
oh, okay.
and I don't want people to be shortchanged about knowing how to reach out to you. So can we talk about, what you're doing with your children's books to help children who have had experiences and the other things that you want people to know about?
Right, okay. Well, I continued that work and am still doing that work as of yesterday. Have many appointments still scheduled ahead. I do them online, on Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or sometimes StreamYard. And I do them in person in San Diego, where I am located. So it's wonderful with the internet facilitating things so wonderfully that we can do sessions. I have people who've come from Australia and all over Europe and Canada, many countries, Mexico. It's just great that we can do them online and we can see each other just as well as you two and I can see each other now,
Right.
hear each other. So it really is a wonderful way to do the regressions if you cannot get here in person. So that is something that is helpful to know because there are so many people. It's been estimated by a couple of different polls, like the Roper poll and another one that years ago that there were, in one poll said there were 5 million Americans plus people all over the world who were having these experiences. And the second poll, which was in 1999, estimated there were 8 million Americans. So that number has probably even increased now. And the work has also taken me into some extra very interesting aspects like the walk-in phenomenon, where somebody from the spirit realm or from the extraterrestrial realm will do a soul exchange with a person here who does not want to be here anymore. And the walk-in then resides in the body. The original soul of the original person goes back into the spirit realm. There's no harm done to the soul, which continues perfectly well. So that's a wonderful phenomenon that I have learned about. And then the hybrid phenomenon, the people who are ET human hybrids
Mhm.
living here primarily to help to raise the consciousness of humanity. They're here completely for good, for
Right.
good reasons, for helpfulness. And I've written a book about that with Miguel Mendonça. That book is called Meet the Hybrids. And my first book was Crop Circles Revealed, because I was a crop circle researcher in England for 27 years in a row. And that is a wonderful part of my work and my consciousness, my interest. And then the second book was Alien Experiences, co-authored with Nadine Lalich. And that's very helpful for people who are having these experiences.
And are
And
those available on Amazon?
yes, yes, they are. Right. And they're also available on my website.
Mhm.
The advantage of ordering from my website, you pay through PayPal, but you just order on the website, and then I get the email from PayPal, and then I send the
Mhm.
book out with a signature. If you
Mhm.
order from Amazon, you don't get the signature. And I always like to put a nice little message in there too for the
Good.
person who's buying
Well,
the
that's a
book,
Good.
wonderful benefit.
with the
Yes.
person's name and a little lovely little message, and then my name. And then the fourth book, which I happen to have right by me, so I'm going to hold it up,
Ooh.
is for children,
Mhm.
and it's called Kids Adventures with ET Friends in Space.
Very
So it's various vignette. We have 18 different vignettes, all illustrated.
nice.
And
Um,
these are literally people that children that have had these experiences
yes,
can
yes,
look at and say, yeah, that's what mine looked like.
yes,
Right.
good for you. Yes, they're real experiences that real live children have had. And they've either told me the details because they remember well,
Mhm.
uh, or they have been old enough to regress. And we
Okay.
found the details both of those ways. So I know that these are real happenings. And for this book, it's wonderful because it can open up the conversation about these things between the child of any age and the parents or
Right.
grandparent or babysitter or whomever.
Mhm.
And it validates for these children who've had these experience, it validates that, ah, somebody gets it, somebody understands.
Mhm.
Yes, oh, wow.
And was that book a collaboration as well?
Yes, it was with the illustrator, Mary Edwards,
Mhm.
who is an experiencer herself. And so I think it's a wonderful service. We are just having it republished by another publishing company. Uh, Not that I initiated, the publisher herself
Mm.
initiated. She said, I want to republish it and get it all over the world. This needs to be out there,
Nice.
children all over the world. So that's in process right now, being published as we speak. So that will be wonderful too, to have kind
Yeah.
of a new approach to getting that out. So my website is Barbara Lamb Regressions,
Mhm.
plural, barbaralamregressions.com. And I have a YouTube channel also, which is Barbara Lamb ET Regressions.
Okay.
And there are quite a number of interviews on that channel. And they're about the extraterrestrial experiences. And they're about a variety of subjects that I am talking about. And they're all kind of unusual aspects that some people experience in life and that I have experienced, like the spontaneous past life recalls and spirit visitations evidences of spirits having visited people, and out-of-body experiences, and my extraterrestrial experiences, a different subject each time,
Mm.
just an hour-long podcast, but of a variety of subjects. And so for people who like to learn outside the box, as
Mhm.
I say, I think that they would find some of these discussions quite interesting.
So I need to ask you, with the push for disclosure and the pushback against disclosure to maintain the status quo,
Yeah.
has any of that caught you up?
Has it caught me up?
Yes. Have you experienced any fallout from either push?
Well, I've just been very, very interested in what they're doing, the little bit, the crumbs here and there about the UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon that the government talks about, which are really UFOs. Um, I always think that it is important that it's being acknowledged that there are these other crafts that we wonder about.
Mhm.
But so much more, in my opinion, so much more needs to come out. And also the focus has been, at least said publicly, the focus from government people is on the crafts themselves and the technology, which is fine. I mean, that's perfectly good. But there's so much more to it, because there are beings
Mhm.
operating those crafts, and there are beings coming here and interacting with millions and millions of people. And of course, that is where I come into this. That's my great interest in this. So
Well, we've got
that's never mentioned, publicly, that I know of, by
Right.
the governments. Although somebody just told me today that on Monday, apparently there was an announcement. I didn't hear it. Maybe you two did. There was an announcement from our government that these crafts are extraterrestrial, and that they have occupants in them. So that means extraterrestrials. So
right.
I'm going to try to find out more about what was actually said.
Unless there were abductees as well. We have just a couple of minutes left. Is there anything that you want to tease us with? And perhaps we can even have you back on, because
Yes.
I know we've just scratched the surface, but is there anything we haven't touched on that you want to just leave people with the idea and have them thrash it around till we get back?
Well, for people who wonder if something like this might have happened to them, um, many people actually, when they think about it, they kind of go back over their lives, they realize that, oh, there were some peculiar things happen that they had wondered about. And that might mean that they had visits and encounters of this type. And so most of the people who come to me have wondered for years, even decades, in many cases, uh, they've wondered about themselves because of these unusual dreams that they've had that involve this type of thing, or they've had missing time, or they've noticed a little lump under their skin in their body, or little markings of various kinds on their bodies that happened one night when they were sleeping, and they cannot imagine how they possibly got that marking on them. Uh, so, and there are lots of different clues, uh, like being afraid to go to sleep at night, or having seen light come in the room at night, or little sparkles of light, or feeling like somebody is there, but not daring to open your eyes and make sure, or opening your eyes and seeing that there are unusual beings there. That seems to be very common. So anyway, there are lots of little hints that people have, people who've had these experiences. And if you have quite a few of these hints, it's well worth looking into, I think. And an important point is that what I believe is festering in the subconscious part of the mind is more harmful to the person. You know, something's festering, but they don't know what it is.
Right.
They might be very, very uneasy about it. That can be more harmful to the person than to find out what that is.
Mhm.
Once it comes up into the light of day, so to speak, the light of the conscious mind,
Right.
then it can be dealt with.
Mhm.
But if it's stuck in the subconscious part of the mind, the person can't really work with it. The person will just feel really bothered by it.
Or even begin to obsess on it.
Right.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So it's
You have so much information and so much knowledge and experience. We definitely, like you were saying, definitely have to have you come back and get deeper into it. And maybe by then, maybe our audience would have sent me questions and I could have them be answered by you. That'd be fantastic, I believe.
all right. I would welcome questions.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Barbara, again.
You're welcome.
Sending love, sending happiness, and blessings all.
Stay with us, Barbara.
Yeah.
Bye.
Many blessings to you all.
Thank you.